Hello, welcome, Michael, to Property Potential Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on. For those that don't know, Michael is founding design principal at Inform Studios with offices in Detroit and Chicago. Michael has won 31 AIA awards. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Robert. That's very kind.
Michael, I'd love to hear about your path to, how you got to where you are today. Just that journey. You're the founding principal, one of the founding principals at Inform. Tell us a little bit about the road to get there.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really kind of you to have us on. I don't think we think of ourselves necessarily as the kind of firm that would be reached out to do this. So it's fun to be able to do. I guess on a personal side of it, so I grew up in Southern California, LA area. Kind of had the background of growing up in the entertainment industry and just seeing films and pictures and things like that done. I always had a creative interest in those types of things. But to be honest, when I went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Well, I wanted to play football, so unsuccessfully, the career to the NFL didn't happen. And I remember at some point, sort of like coming out of athletics, like, what do I want to do? I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but if anybody's familiar with the TV show LA Law, I was watching that with my girlfriend, who eventually became my wife, and I was like, they had asked one of the attorneys, "Hey, did you always want to be an attorney?" And he said, "Oh no, I really wanted to be an architect." And I looked at her and go, "Hey, that sounds interesting. Maybe I'll do that." And so that kind of started the journey, and just had an interest level in it. I think the schooling in architecture and design is a little bit different than what the profession looked to be like, because there was a lot of ambitious type of projects in school, and then you get into the real world, and not most buildings are overly ambitious, but I think between, hey, do you sort of go back to entertainment industry, or do you look to sort of craft out some things in the world of the built environment? Loved the idea that these were physical spaces that would stay, and it wasn't something that was just an experience on camera. And so I think that really eventually drew me to it, and we've tried to participate in as many things that we feel have an opportunity to inspire and impact people's lives. That's kind of how we measure success. So probably a long story, but
That's great.
that's a little bit of the summary.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. On your website, on Inform's website, it says data-led design. For those that don't know, explain what data-led design is, because I think that's an interesting approach.
So there's a lot to that, and I would say that probably understanding design through digital technology is a big part of what we look to do now. So when we've thought about projects before, and I would say when sort of started in school, you had, what was the big idea behind things, what are the vision, and I think what we try to look at more is many more parameters that could affect things, both in the input and in the critique side. So people might be familiar with terminology computational design or parametric design, but it's really using digital technology in a way that you can put a lot of inputs, and then you may get like a myriad of outputs, so that you can quickly go through, hey, here's maybe 100 scenarios of how to solve this problem, but it's very data driven in terms of the outputs that it gives you. So does it optimize efficiency? Does it optimize whatever type of criteria you want to evaluate? And so I think just using digital tools and advancing that more and more. And now you hear a lot about artificial intelligence and how AI could
Sure.
effectively. It's same idea. I think of some of the scripts that we were writing. It's not so. It's a little bit more. You have control over it, but the idea is that you're getting intuitive responses from the computer, and it really helps you design as much by critic as it is generator.
How does the future look? I mean, I'm sure you're just starting to see the beginning of AI impact your field, but what does it look like 5 or 10 years from now with, the advancement of technology?
I have no idea. I really don't. I think a lot of people try to prognosticate on what that could look like. I know this, like, what is the trajectory to date? So, we started doing things by hand. Then, you kind of dealt with CAD, and then it got into BIM, building information modeling overall. But I really felt like when we started doing computational and parametric design, it really advanced the speed in which you could evaluate things. You could be more comprehensive and faster at it. So it just resulted in better solutions. And I think when we combine that with digital fabrication, we could talk about that a little bit more too. But those two things really have the opportunity to change the design and delivery process of the built environment. And that's kind of a little bit of our mission, is centered around that. When I think about AI, one of the things that's really interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people have played with Midjourney now, and it kind of went through its evolution. But hey, we can type in sort of conceptual ideas verbally, and then you have output that is very visual, but it doesn't connect to, say, those data led parameters, like, okay, would this even be successful or not? It's very much just a visual interest tool. But there's so many people developing so many softwares. And if I look at the trajectory of things, essentially it's just made things more efficient and overall higher quality solutions to things. So I would only imagine that that would help, but I don't think this is replacing the people component. I think it's just another way to consider using digital technology as a tool.
Do you have any favorite style, or are you what inspires you, or where do you find creative inspiration?
Um, I, everywhere. Travel is a big thing. Love to
Travel.
be able to visit different cities, cultures, understanding everything from food to language. There's so many things that influence things. I think we're a very contextual based firm. We've really enjoyed working on projects in different parts of the country, or even in North America. And then to be able to provide solutions that are highly contextually based. So one of the things that came out more recently is we've had a lot of success during doing urban responsive projects. So pedestrian bridges, or spaces or places that really become destinations in urban locations that create identity, or what I would say is more shape identity. And so a lot of people have talked about this idea of placemaking, and we were really embraced that, and we've done a lot of projects that contributed to placemaking. But there was a lot of conversation, particularly related to indigenous voice and agency, about this idea of placekeeping. And I think that really resonated with us, so that it wasn't so much taking outside influence and putting it into something and then giving it its identity from something outward, but to really identify what's important about that location and place, and how do you mine that out and surface it, and then allow it to become emblematic, or the sort of like core of what a project is about, so that people understand the quality and meaning of a place better. You kind of pull out the positive aspects of that, and make it really live.
Sure.
Those are the things that I think inspire us, is to really you know really help define and sort of tease out what identity of a place is.
Yeah, that's a great philosophy, great approach. Are there any projects that you look back on your career and think, "Wow, I'm really proud of that"? Is there any one project that you can think of that you have, designed, built, that your stands out?
It changes a little bit. I would say you you really love the projects that you're currently doing. I think there, and the other problem is oftentimes you go back and you look at projects, and you see all the things that didn't come out quite the way that you hoped.
Right.
So I think sometimes it's a little bit easier for other people to celebrate some things that you've done than yourself. But I think that we've had a couple of projects that over time have really been embraced by the community, and those are the ones that are the most important. And I think of probably early on, we did the Ann Arbor District Library, and there was a fantastic story about it was a greenfield site, and we really tried to preserve as much of the greenfield site. So we put the building at the edge, only to find out that the wooded environment had a lot of ash trees. I don't know if you're familiar with the story of the emerald ash borer kind of coming into the U.S., but it devastated wooded areas. And so what we looked to do, in short, was kind of harvest those trees from the site that were basically dead, and then build the building out of the trees and integrate all that. And just knowing like that was important to Ann Arbor and what they felt was important. And I think it was difficult in the beginning for the community to really embrace maybe what that project looked like, because it had a little bit pretty strong modern bent. But over time, people just sort of grew to love it. And I think just seeing a community kind of embrace that and take a lot of just civic pride and education in that was really valuable to us. And then I would say the second is one that's more recently completed, which is the Van Leesten pedestrian bridge in Providence, Rhode Island. And we've seen the same type of thing. Long projects. There was community support in it, but oftentimes, there's a lot of conflict over these types of projects. And then to ultimately people, feeling really happy that they're there, and to know that and I think it's humbling too, because you realize you're a small instrument in the part of a much larger collection of people that have to contribute to make something happen. But it's really neat to be able to like go to those places, see them used, and just think, wow, I remember when this was an idea.
Yeah. Yeah, you touched a little bit on it earlier, the idea of sustainability with the previous project. And just wondering, are you seeing that becoming more of a theme in your current projects or going forward? What role does sustainability play?
I feel like that's something that's always been there. And, even at the earliest moments of introduction to architecture in Southern California, there was a big movement on solar panels and things like that in the 70s and 80s, and energy conservation. And then kind of like, I don't know, maybe lost the momentum of trajectory of at least being talked about, but I think some of it was sort of practiced. And probably in the late 90s and early 2000s, and when we formed our firm, I think LEED was kind of coming into the foray of things. And I remember teaching at University of Michigan, and some students asked, like, what do you think about sustainability? And I just remember thinking, we should, like, that shouldn't be what we're trying to do. That should just be automatically integrated into everything of how we do. So like the quality of design is dependent upon sustainability being a part of it. And then I think we're just getting better at it. And by we, I mean, as an industry, the discussion of it more has created a greater prominence to it. So manufacturers are thinking about it, fabricators are thinking about it, clients are thinking about it. So it's just becoming a lot more endemic, and it's getting better all the time. So what was LEED version 1.0 is standard in code now.
For those that don't know what LEED is, you want to just give a minute description on it?
Yeah, so there's the USGBC, which is the United States Green Building, and they developed a program called LEED, which is the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And that put together kind of a third-party set of metrics that measured sustainability in a lot of ways. It was very energy dependent in the beginning, and then it's had to go through multiple iterations and different versions to become better and more comprehensive, because you realize that sustainability can be measured in so many ways, and it's very hard to have sort of a one program fits all So I think a lot of this is it's a mindset and how you treat things, um, and it is very difficult to measure all of the aspects of sustainability. And we talk about it now. I can't remember the prime minister in the Scandinavian country that came up with it, but it's a kind of a triple bottom line philosophy where it's environmental and social and finance, right? Like all three of those things have to come together. If you can't afford it and people don't love it, it's not going to be supported to preserve
Right.
the environment. So you need all those things to work together.
Everything has to come together. Michael, you work on a ton of different projects. Obviously, not every project goes according to plan. Do you have a good story of a project that took a different turn? And would love to know what you might have learned during the course of whatever that project might have been.
So I think one of the most important things that I feel like I've learned professionally is that projects need champions, and more than one. So I'm even going to promote out one that I hope will find more champions behind it. So we recently did a project for City of Miami, and it is connecting the Baywalk essentially at the area right in front of the PAM Museum. And so I-395 goes to South Beach there, and it sort of cuts off that connection. And it was important for them to have that public amenity. What's amazing about this is you have the Frost Science Museum, the Arched Center, and PAM. So you have Science Museum, Art Museum, and Performing Arts all as an integrated cultural center with outdoor space. But all of these things require, you have to pay entry fees and things like that to go in. And certainly there's schools and things that have aspect. But if we think about it, it's not a very equitable environment to get connection to. And so here was an opportunity in creating this Bay Link that we can integrate this idea of placekeeping, right? Because this cultural center has all of these in, and how do we sort of like weave a series of programs into that so that the connection is more than just getting underneath the byway. The connection is much more about celebrating the cultural aspects that are there and introducing it to us. So we have different programs for an Oculus that gives people a sort of sense of this is the um, uh, marine biodiversity that exists right here in the Biscayne Bay that people may not even be aware of. And so we want to illustrate that. And there's a small sort of outdoor performance area. And then going underneath the highway is what we call Gallery 17. So it would be like an interactive arts installation that would go in. Since PAM has 16 galleries, this would be sort of the 17th outdoor gallery. So it's giving an introduction to all of these cultural centers. And more importantly, it's allowing it to be equitable for everybody to be able to come and experience the waterfront. Because if I think about the waterfront in the Biscayne Bay, the only people who can really get out in the water are people who have access to a boat. So if you have the opportunity to sort of experience all of this. So when you look at this, whether it's somebody at the Miami DDA or it's people at PAM or it's people in the other cultures, who's going to like really get behind this and support it? Because there's always 100 reasons why not to do something.
Sure.
And so you have to have the people that understand why it's important to have these cultural identities and places that just give people a sort of sense of this is community and this is identity and this is great for both people who live there and for visitors come to experience Miami. So that's one that we're hoping to see more of that. But I feel like every project needs not just one champion, but a series of champions to get behind it to see it through.
Are there any other common misperceptions in design that you think most people hold?
I don't know that there's a most people. I think there's a differing set of misperceptions, right? That somehow digital technology makes things so much faster, and you just kind of push a button and it's there. But it has to be thoughtful. I think one of the things that we found a little bit more is more people being involved in the decision making and moving forward of a project creates a greater stewardship of it.
Sure.
and people believe in it more, and it creates that support. So that amount of time that it takes is really astounding. I think
Yeah.
we've found that it used to be that you would think projects would move a little bit faster. I think they move a little bit slower because of all these. So we've seen really important projects. It's not unlikely at all that they take about a decade
That's
to
incredible.
really put in place.
What are some good effective project management tips? I mean, you have to juggle different, stakeholders, but certainly, you are juggling several different projects, all with, huge timelines. What are some secrets that you can share?
I need somebody else
Tough
to
one.
share them with me.
Sure.
We've tried a number of things, kind of like managing hours, managing budgets. The most critical thing I would say is communication,
Yeah.
making sure that um, you're communicating with the right people and through the right method. A lot of people want to do things through email, text. Getting on the phone with people is important. Making sure that you have kind of a write up that's kind of consistent with that so everybody's on the same page. Involve everybody. It's a very challenging aspect to do, but the quality of communication that you have with all the constituents and all the stakeholders in a project is the only way to viably see a project through.
Yeah. How has COVID impacted design and architecture and the way people live and work? What have you seen kind of post COVID? Have you seen a significant shift, or do you think things are reverting back to, work in an office versus work from home or hybrid? What's your take?
I think there's a lot of things that COVID did. So I think there was already a pressure for like the work from home. Work life balance was already a conversation in front of that. Definitely brought it to the forefront. I think people recognize that in person relationship building, there's just nothing like it. It is by far the best, right? Like we've even experienced that.
Sure.
It's so much better to be able to communicate with somebody in a person to person relationship. But you also recognize that, hey, having everybody in here every day of the week, there's a lot of other responsibilities that are there, and if you put in commute time and other things like that, can we do things in a way to mix it? So we feel like the hybrid has been the best success, but it's still, you really have to prioritize the in-person connection to make those things happen, whether it's colleague or client or whoever it may be. I think that's the only way to advance the quality of relationship.
Hmm. Uh, I guess sort of jumping around a little bit in terms of Inform and your growth there and growing the company. What do you hope to see in 5 or 10 years? I guess you personally and also Inform Studios itself. What would be the ideal, you know, picture, 5, 10 years from now?
So ultimately, I think one of the things that we really love is a collaborative environment. We work with a lot of different collaborators, whether they be multidisciplinary, like in structural or landscape or urban design, although we have more of that in house. I think we love the idea that our firm becomes more multidisciplinary because, again, it's good to have that like direct connection, interaction in house, but you also recognize the amount of expertise that it's good to have a firm that focuses on this thing. And so I think, where I see us in 5 to 10 years is pushing more on the technology side and really extending our tentacles out to having great relationships with fabrication partners. So I think our size, we'd probably like to grow a little bit more because it gives you a greater bandwidth and capacity to develop those relationships. Like I can't own all of those personally,
Sure.
but it's good to have a really high quality network within this organization, and then to really spread that out so that there's deep relationships with other people. So that as you look at, ultimately, it's about the projects and the quality of what they can do for the people in the community that these projects serve, and to be able to say we can bring the best assets to solve the issues that you have within this project. And everyone is a little bit different, but we want to continue to like learn and grow new relationships with other collaborators.
That sounds like a pretty incredible, exciting future. What would you, kind of going back, what advice would you give young architects just entering the field now, young designers? Where was the
Hopefully
wisdom
learn to
you would
love
give them?
it. You just, I know that there's always a push to maybe like do let I like I've never felt like it was worthwhile to sacrifice my family for my career, because again it comes like relationships is the most important thing to me, honestly. I'm a Christian, and my relationship with Christ is like the number one priority in my life. And then through that, my family and neighbors and just people in general is the most important focus. But I think God's really given me a love for the design of the environment, and that's my avenue to connect to people. And so I look for like for young designers and things like that, understanding how you can impact people will better serve you. You'll find a greater commitment and kind of love for what you do. So I think that's most important thing is just to really develop the passion for what you're able to do. And hopefully you really feel like that's inspired from a place of meaning. And that comes, from, in my perspective, it's what God has designed me for.
I think that's beautifully put. What books or podcasts or other resources have influenced you or your career? Just kind of building upon that a little bit more. Is there anything specific, or it could even be maybe other architects?
Man, that's a tough question because there's so many influences from so many things, and not that I don't
Yeah.
have 'em. I think one that was pretty meaningful with me. I really enjoy Simon Sinek. I think his first. I watched his like 10-minute video on Start with Why, and then really went to that. And I think again this comes back to meaning is important to me. People is important to me. Leaders Eat Last has been influential. So really love the series of things that he's done. Malcolm Gladwell's books, just
Sure.
a whole series of them, because it just gives you like a lens in which to see the complexity of the world that is tangible. Like, ooh, I can see those patterns now. It helps me understand like the world in a better context. Had an amazing amount of books relative to either biophilia or other things from the sustainability side. And then honestly, like pop culture, even, just silly movies and things like that. There's just so many ways you can take interest. I mentioned travel and things like that. Like
Sure.
going to experience places and people and culture is one of the coolest things. There's nothing like going someplace, and I love going with family, friends, and things like that. But if you ever have the opportunity, like on business travel, and you just get to strike up a conversation with anybody, right?
Right.
Because you're by yourself, and so if you're social and you want to be able to do that, you have those conversations. So I remember I was in a conference. I went to speak at a conference in Indianapolis just not too long ago, and uh, was going to a Chick-fil-A of all places, but there was a group of homeless out in front, so went in, got it, and then just had a conversation with them, kind of had dinner with this group. And it is amazing, the life stories that you get, their trajectory in life, where and how they ended up, but an incredible perspective. One person taught me so much about the place that I live and work in Detroit, because he was from Detroit and talked about his journey. So I know that was a really long-winded answer, but it's anything from books
Everyone has a
to
story. That's, I think, the
everybody has a
beauty of the word.
story. And you can't value, hey, the most famous architect over the person who seems like they're down on their luck. We're all equally created beings, and every person is important, and you can take influence from so many different places.
I think that's a great way to end the conversation. Michael, thank you so much for your time. If people want to reach out to you, after listening to this podcast, what's the best way for them to find you?
Oh man, I guess well, probably LinkedIn is a pretty easy one. They could message me
Sure.
there, and or if you just Google Inform Studio, we should come up, and I'm pretty sure my email is on there somewhere.
That's good.
I'd spell it out, but it has a hyphen in
We'll
it,
put
and the
it in
whole thing
the
it's
notes,
complicated.
the notes section here of the podcast. Michael, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. This was a great conversation.